Well, where we left off, we had these scary words: hypogynous, perigynous, epigynous, ovary, inferior, superior. What? Let's back up a little bit. So we'll recall that flower parts. I don't like red. Flower parts. I guess that's red. Start from the bottom, go to the top, because that's how plants grow. First we have sepals, then we have petals, then we have stamens, and then we have the pistil. The way we drew it. Here's another diagram. Same basic thing. Here we have the sepals, here we have the petals, here we have the stamens, and here we have the pistil. In the order that they're produced, more or less, and that's a nice flower. But turns out not all flowers are like that. So this needs a little explanation. So what I'd like to do is try to sketch. And it turns out there are three of these things that I call relative insertion of flower parts. And they all have genus in their name. Let me see if I can write it down here. One of them is called hypogynous, hypogynous, with, that's the with sign. Is that a good sign? Yeah. A superior ovary. Another one is called perigynous, perigynous. Also with, is the with sign. Is that a good sign? Yeah, sure. A superior ovary. It's hard to say that and not sound like you've been drinking. And the other one is called epigynous, epi to the gynous. With, boy, I hope it's something different this time. Yes, it is. An inferior ovary. Okay, so let's start with the one on the left. And we're going to draw a flower. And we'll draw the receptacle. And we're going to draw sepals. And we're going to draw petals. And we're going to draw stamens. Happy little stamens reaching the sky. This drawing is getting a little redundant at this point, but we're looking at something different. Sepals, petals, stamen, boom. So on this flower, the sepals and the petals and the stamens are all attached below the ovary, and they all rise off of the flower below the ovary. And the name of this relative insertion of flower parts, sometimes I call this, get back here. Sometimes I call this flower type and ovary position. Flower type and ovary position. Sometimes there's not really nice names for the categories of things, but when you teach and also when you ask questions on quizzes, it's nice to be able to say what the broad group is that these little individual conditions are components of. So that's what I call them, flower type and ovary position. So what we have here is these sepals and the petals and the stamens separate from each other and rising off of the flower below the ovary. So these parts of the flower are hypo to the gynecium. They're below, as in hypodermic, underneath. Hypo means low. And to look at it a different way, the ovary is on the top. It has a superior ovary. So this flower that we just sketched, which is like all the other flowers we sketched, is hypogynous with a superior ovary. Okay, so let's draw a slightly different flower, and let's draw a cup here, sort of a cup-shaped thing. Make it sort of thick. And this cup-shaped thing, at the edge of this cup-shaped thing, I would like to draw sepals and petals and stamens. And let's put the pistil right here. Boom. And what we have done is we've made a structure, a compound structure that consists of the bases of the sepals, the bases of the petals, the bases of the stamens, and that cup is called a hypanthium, Hypanthium. It has a nickname. It's called snookers. I really hated that in high school. People call it snookers. It got really mad. You start fights. No, not that kind of nickname. It's another term for it, sometimes called a floral cup. But that's a little ambiguous, exactly what you mean by that. It's called a hypanthium, and again, what it consists of is the fused bases of the stamen, of the sepals, the petals, and the stamens. Now let's look carefully at, and here's the ovary, and they're fused for part of their length, and then they rise off of the flower, not where they're attached, but around. Look at the word, perigynous. They rise off of the flower around the ovary. So this flower, because it has this hypanthium that partly surrounds, but is free from the ovary, is called perigynous. But look where they're actually attached. They're actually attached, even though I kind of drew it too much, so it looked kind of muddy. They're actually attached below the ovary. So the ovary is still superior. The ovary is positioned above where these structures, or the joint structure, same thing, is actually attached. It's below, so the ovary is above, so the ovary is superior. I liken this to a ping pong ball in a teacup. The teacup is the hypanthium, the fused bases of the stamens and the sepals and the petals, and the ping pong ball is the ovary. And there's some space there between the cup. Let's imagine a tennis ball in a teacup. Jam it in. Boom. So we're going to draw this flower. We're going to draw the hypanthium. And it's got sepals and petals and stamens. And the ovary is fused. The ovary is in there, but it's fused to the hypanthium. The ovary is here. So look at what this flower is like. The sepals and the petals and the bases of the stamens are fused into a hypanthium, but the hypanthium is fused to the ovary. So where they rise off of the flower and where they're attached is above the epi to the gynoecium. And where is the ovary? It's I'm going to draw a line. It's down here. It's inferior. So an epigynous flower is the only kind of flower that has an inferior ovary, epi to the gynoecium. It basically has a hypanthium, a fused compound structure, a floral cup, but it's fused to the ovary. And the ovary's in the bottom. I mean, what's the ovary down here? Over here? The ovary is down here. The ovary is like sort of in the middle, and the ovary is the top. But the middle is not really the middle, it's really the top because they're attached below. And those are the three types of, what do you call it? Relative insertion of floral parts, / flower type and ovary position. Hypogynous is more common. I'm going to make a guess. I'm going to say maybe 70% of flowers, maybe 80. Epigynous is somewhat uncommon, but a lot of really important plants have it. Perigynous is not very common, but we'll see it in one of our important plant families, the rose family. And let's look at some pics. Well, now this drawing might make some more sense. Here we have, now even though, be cautious, here's sepals. The petals are fused together, but they're not fused to the stamens, they're not fused to the sepals. There's not a compound structure. These petals are just separate from the other flower parts, sepals, petals, stamens. Don't worry about the fact that they're fused together to form a sympetalous corolla. And they're attached below. It's a hypogynous with a superior ovary. Here, this structure here, this is a hypanthium. And it consists of the, nice drawing textbook I robbed you from. They don't really show any sepals in this. I'd like to draw some in. What the heck? I'm allowed. I'm getting paid the big bucks. And here are the petals. And like a ping pong ball in a teacup. This is the hypanthium. This is the ovary. The sepals and the petals and the stamens are sort of surround the ovary, perigynous, but the ovary is still above where these things are attached. Perigynous flower. Cherries are like that. Here's an epigynous one. So here's the hypanthium. And it's kind of thick. And here's the ovary. And look where everything rises off. Here's a line. The ovary's down here. Hypanthium fused to the ovary. Sepals. Two sepals. Petals. There's some stamens. Now, there's some stamens that happen to be attached to the petals. You know that old saying, epipetalous stamens doth not a hypanthium make. I saw that in a fortune cookie the other day. Really strange. Yeah, sometimes you have stamens attached to petals, but that doesn't mean it's a floral cup. A floral cup has to be all three of those things. They're not especially common, but let's look at some pics, some actual pics. Here's a picture of a plant with hypogynous. So the sepals fell off a while ago of this bloodroot, but here we have petals, and here we have stamens, and here's the ovary. Definitely hypogynous with a superior ovary. Here is a cherry flower. This is the ping pong ball in a teacup thing. The ovary is kind of like here. Oh, and this is the floral cup, this green cup. And again, it looks like a cup. So here's a petal. Here's a stamen. The sepals are really small in this case. They're probably here. They're sort of obsolete. But can you see that this is like a cup, and it surrounds the ovary. This is a perigynous flower. The hypanthium loosely surrounds the ovary. Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. Here's another hypogynous flower. This is perigynous. Did I say hypogynous before? I hope I didn't. Perigynous. Okay, good, got it. This is one of the flowers that Callie studies. This is purple loosestrife. And here we have a cross-section of a flower, and this is a hypanthium. It's a fused, all those things. Sepals, petals, there's some stamens here attached someplace, and this is a perigynous flower. The sepals are rising off of the flower here and here, but they're actually attached down here at the base of the ovary. So it has a superior ovary. This is the ovary, and the flower parts are actually attached below it, but they are fused together and they rise off of the flower right about here. I'm having fun drawing on this. Purple loosestrife. Here's a kind of difficult to interpret for some other reasons, but the rose family has flowers that are either perigynous or epigynous. And sometimes they're only a tiny bit perigynous, so the hypanthium is really small and it's difficult to recognize or easy to miss. And this is a rose flower. And here's a cross-section of the rose flower. And this is a hypanthium. This matures into something called a rose hip. And so here's fused bases, all those things talked about. Here's sepals, here's petals, here's a bunch of stamens. And yeah, it's a hypanthium. Here it is in fruit. There's a little peculiarity about the rose too, which is that they have many separate parts of the gynoecium that mature into fruits, about which more very soon. Here's a picture of an epigynous flower. It's an evening primrose. And yeah, you have to look sort of carefully to see what this part here that looks like the stalk of a flower, that looks like a pedicel. Look carefully. At the base of this is a kind of expanded and winged. This is the ovary. And there's a sort of inconspicuous hypanthium fused all those things we mentioned before, sepals, petals, and bases of the stamens, and it forms this tube, this hypanthium. And here are the sepals rising off of the flower, here are the petals rising off of the flower, and the ovary, I'm going to draw a line, boom, the ovary is down here. The ovary is underneath all of that stuff. This is a plant with an inferior ovary. And by the way, this style, these are stigma lobes, right? And so this, if you were to have this in real life and rip this flower apart carefully, you'd see this is a tube, and this style goes all the way down here, all the way from here to here. Perhaps in just a day. Pollen tubes. Pollen tubes are among the fastest growing things in nature. Think of a large flower that only lasts a day, and that the pollen grows from the stigma down to the inside of the ovary. That's fast growing. Epigynous flowers. Here's another example of some epigynous flowers. A little difficult to interpret because it's kind of a lot going on here. But so I'm going to draw a circle around a flower. This is a flower this is a bunch of flowers. This is a cluster of flowers, or several clusters. It's a member of the carrot or parsley family, the Apiaceae. And here, let's see if I can draw this dark green spot. That's the ovary. Okay. Oh. And here are the petals. There's just one. The rest have fallen off. Here are the styles. Has an inferior ovary. These flowers look really swollen underneath. See, they look really swollen underneath. I'm circling the ovary on this sort of out of focus inflorescence. It's because there's an ovary underneath those petals. The sepals are really small in this family. This cow parsnip has a inferior ovary. It's an epigynous flower. Epigynous flowers are the only ones that have inferior ovaries. Both hypogynous and perigynous have superior ovaries. Okay. So the next thing we're going to learn about is a slightly deep dive into the pistil / carpel / gynecium, the female parts of the flowers, and that's going to be a little complicated. We're going to learn about 3 types of what are called gynecium types. Do we have a picture here? No, we have a little review of pollination. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Tune in soon for the next podcast that's going to drop soon on differences in gynecium type. Thanks for listening. Botany out.